it really wasn't until I went to perfumery school, and my mentor was a synesthete, and I looked at these paintings he had done for brands like Estee Lauder, and I said, I can smell that painting. And he said, oh, you have synesthesia. And what I realized is, from day one of learning, because at the beginning of perfumery school where I was training, you have to memorize thousands of ingredients. Mm-hmm. And from day one, when I would smell an ingredient, I automatically saw it. I didn't smell it right away, I could see it. I saw the color, I saw the shape, I saw the texture. And this is how I memorized all of the ingredients. And it was the same way that I had memorized for my chemistry exams, the same way I had learned my calculus, and all of these studies that I had done pre starting to train at this perfumery school. And at that time, the only two forms of synesthesia that I realized I had was the color grapheme synesthesia. So I, saw colors and numbers and letters that you're familiar with, and odor or smell synesthesia. So I saw colors and shapes and textures when I would smell, mm-hmm. Automatically and intuitively. But then over time, because I was exercising it so much, just by making very traditional perfumes, because I was working at Coty, first Avon and then at Coty. And so I would exercise it in perfumes, and the marketing team would come to me and the advertising team would come to me and say, these are the colors we're thinking of using for the juice, or this is the color we're going to use for the bottle or the advertisement. And I would say, well, wait a minute, that doesn't match. And they would say, well, what do you mean? I said, well, the perfume that we've created doesn't smell like that color, or doesn't smell like that texture. It doesn't smell like that emotion. And then the emotional piece started coming into it. I said, it doesn't smell like that emotion. And at first, they didn't really know what I was talking about. And I didn't know how I knew that. I just automatically knew that it wasn't going to be successful on shelf because it wasn't cohesive. I went back to NYU to graduate school again. And I started researching a little bit of neuroscience, a little bit of sociology, a little bit of consumer behavior, to realize how we can really understand this part of the brain that functions with olfaction and emotion. Also researching synesthesia. So how could synesthesia play a role? And is synesthesia the perception, is it subjective or is it objective? And tell me your research and your findings here. But in my findings, all of the types of synesthesia that I hit on, it was all subjective, except for olfaction. And so I started doing these global tests in many cities and countries all around the world, because what I found is that most people are not synesthetes, obviously, but everyone can smell color, and they can smell the same colors. And even more, you would think that, okay, so everyone smells color, everyone smells the same color. Really, there's so many cultural differences, generational differences, environmental differences. It doesn't matter. For preferences, odor preferences, it matters where you grow up, the generation you grew up in and your living environment. But for understanding odor through color, it's all the same. And as I was doing all of this studying and getting deeper and deeper into it and starting to work more and more with brands, the other types of synesthesia started to just develop. And what I realized is very quickly, I can taste through color too, which, odor and taste are so intricately linked, mm-hmm. They live together anyway. When we put something in our mouth, 85% of it, we're actually smelling, through our saliva and through our olfactive receptors, and only 15% we actually taste. But when I was putting something in my mouth, I could see it. And then I started having it with music. So I could hear something, and I could hear music, and I could see it. I could see the patterns. I could see, at first it was just two-dimensional patterns and some color. Now I can see it more in a three-dimensional way with color and texture. And this was interesting because at the time, I had already created the olfactive identity for Valentino, but Pier Paolo, the creative director, was working on a new project, and he just sent me the music. And through the music, I created the perfume. And then I started touching surfaces like different fabrics, different textiles. And again, I could see everything.
Mm-hmm.
And then about 2 years ago, and this is blowing my mind and I haven't looked into it because it's not always comfortable. Now I can feel music in my skin. So when I listen to music, I can feel it on my skin. And I can do the same thing when I look at something. I can feel it in my skin. Well, I think they start off really subtle. They start off really small, just like little moments, and then they just grow. So now I would say they're still not as intense as my olfactive. That's still the biggest one. When I smell something, I see an entire world. Um, that one's probably the most intense. It's even more intense than the one I saw in childhood with the letters and the numbers. And it's probably because I use it the most. I imagine they kind of work in my individual experience like muscles. You know, the more you kind of see it and interact with it, the more that it kind of dominates. But they all build in intensity slowly as they come about. When we're menstruating, our olfactive ability, it's like our emotional state, it's a little bit all over the place. Mm-hmm. And so during those times, my ability in synesthesia was just helped me win because I could just focus on the color because it's so consistent, and figure out what the ingredients were. And he understood that because he could tell all of us when we were, menstruating or ovulating, which seems like a very intimate detail of our lives, and it was, but it's just part of the world that we live in the perfumery space. So, I would say to him, okay, I'm having a difficult day, but okay, I smell pink. He's like, okay, go with that. And so with Lady Gaga, we went in as Coty because she's a very big celebrity and was at the time as well. We went in with the traditional marketing view of here's 5 or 7 marketing concepts and here are some perfumes that go along with them. And she wasn't satisfied. And so she was there, and Nick Knight was there, who's quite a famous photographer and filmographer at this point, and Nicola Formichetti, who was her stylist, who's also a very famous fashion designer now, and someone that she called her ears, and eventually she called me her nose. And so she wasn't happy with what was presented. And I said, okay, Gaga, what color is your music? Tell me what your music looks like. What color is it? What shape is it? How does it move? How does it feel? And so she started explaining to me the shape of her music and how she composes music and what that means. And then in color and dimension. And so we had this entire conversation about that. And then I said, okay, I have it. And I left and I created 2 new perfumes. And I went to see her a month later with the 2 new ones, and she couldn't decide which one she wanted more. And eventually the one that was launched is because it slightly did better on the global test that we did before we launched it, but she couldn't decide which one was more her. And so the process ended up only being on the shape and texture and dimensionality, and literally how she sees her music and then how it makes her feel. I think for my work, it's the opposite. It's a gift. It's an absolute gift. I can do things so much quicker, so much more efficiently because I have a vision for everything right away. For life, it's terribly disruptive. Mm-hmm. I'm always seeing things, so it can be hard to focus and hard to even for me, it's hard to make decisions on what I like versus I don't like, because I can see dimension within everything. So I don't have absolute loves of things or hatred of things. My world is not black and white. My world is so many colors. And so it's hard to communicate with people sometimes. It's hard to make choices. it's hard to relax. I have a very hard time just relaxing because there's so much going on all the time, whether my eyes are closed or open. So yeah, in work, it's a complete blessing. And in life, it's a challenge. Every person that I've met that has synesthesia, and I don't know if this is the case for you, is an artist. And not just an artist on the side or a creative on the side. It's what they do. It's their primary voice and their primary production, if you would say, in this life. And I think we all do it for the same reasons. You know, people that produce art and the people that have synesthesia, I think there's a level of art form. Like I work with a lot of perfumers that are brilliant perfumers, but they don't have synesthesia, and you can smell the difference in their work. You know, and then you look at different fine art. You know, I'm a big fan of Kandinsky. I didn't understand until I understood he was a synesthete. You know, because I could feel his work. I could live in his work. It's interesting. It's almost like with the synesthesia, you go into another level, and it's like you can get a little bit closer to finding that antidote, a little bit closer, but maybe that's just the ego talking and it's untrue. You know, I don't know. I don't know. When I started the formula, we started it with the smell of dirt, with the smell of a leather shoe, with the smell of sweat, with the smell of grass. And so the first piece of the scent smells like a soccer cleat in dirt. And then we started thinking about a basketball and how a basketball bounces, because now you have the running from the soccer cleat, but then you have like a basketball bouncing. And so what is the smell there? And the most important smell there is the smell of your hands, actually. And so we recreated the smell of when your hands touch a basketball, your sweat mixed with the rubber from the basketball. And then we wanted to get the stop-start motion because it's not a continual loop. So what makes you stop? Well, the most dynamic sound for stopping is on a basketball court with the sneaker, that screech that happens. Well, what does that smell like? It's a very specific smell when a sneaker screeches on a basketball court. So we took that smell, which has a very particular color too, and we recreated that smell and put that in there. And the last thing we did, which was more functional, is, you know, they wanted the smell of Air Force One. So what does Air Force One smell like when you open the box, when they're brand new? And that smell is interesting because it gives you, like, for people that love sneakers, it gives you a little jolt, you know, that, you know, brand new sneakers, and especially for kids. And so from there, we got the colors, we got the textures, but mostly the movement, which is very tied into the emotion. And to get it to lift even more, I used an ingredient that I don't talk about, but an ingredient that allows a fragrance from the bottom to the top to kind of, you know, move up.
Yes.
When I think about my color smell synesthesia, there's already a system in place because everyone smells the same colors. I just, through my synesthesia, I do it automatically and intuitively. So there is a system already in place, so I don't have to search for it. I try to go into deeper depths than potentially I was before, and my mind does that with adding texture and shape and whatnot. I have synesthetic experience throughout my meditations, and I meditate every day, at minimum for 45 minutes in the morning, and there's no logical or rational or I can't translate what I see into an explanation or into an understanding, or it exists solely on its own without me. It's almost like it is like I'm diving into my unconscious or my subconscious. I don't even know, but I'm diving into another part of myself that in some way has no relationship to the part of myself that's with you right now. And it doesn't feel like the search is futile, though. I don't want to give up. And in fact, I just want to go deeper and deeper and deeper and see if it reveals itself at some moment.
I do.
So I have the smell synesthesia, just like her.
Uh-huh.
I also see colors when I hear sounds, any sort of sound. So like that sound,
Uh-huh.
or listening to music, or even when I meditate and it's quiet, whatever sounds come in, I can hear. Um, and then also, like her, when I see letters and numbers, they have certain colors associated with them. We first learned that we had synesthesia when Dawn was in perfumery school, when we were probably 24, 23, 24. And so I still didn't really understand what it was. She would come home from perfumery school, stick a blotter under my nose, which I don't know if I have any blotters with me, but basically she would she would come home with a fragrance, make
Mm-hmm.
me smell it, and say, "What color is this?" And I would tell her, and she like, "That's amazing." And she did that multiple times. And she said, "We have synesthesia." I said, "Well, what is that?" And so I learned more and more about it as I realized what it was, and the different ways that it came into my life. Yeah, they're basically the same colors. Our letters and our numbers, probably up to a certain point. We've never really gone above 100. And
Mm-hmm.
depending on the day, they might be shades of difference. Um, I might think something is more of like a grassy green one day. She might think it's more of like a hunter green. So the shading might vary on some days, but generally we have the same colors and numbers and letters. The fact that Dawn, first and foremost, can create using her mind, using the colors in her mind, using the textures in her mind, the emotions, um, all of the shapes, all of the ways she uses synesthesia to put something in a bottle just with her mind. I think the end result is really how it all plays out, how we're successful. So when she takes a brand through our creative process, and a lot of it is synesthesia, and then she shows them their fragrance or their scent, and
Mm-hmm.
they smell it and say, "That is us." They want it to be such a huge event. They want it to be so, and everyone's in the room and everyone's excited, and they smell it and they say, "Well, yeah, that's us." And she
Okay.
says, "I know that's you." And so
Mm-hmm.
that is it right there. And it's hard to put that into, if you're thinking about marketing in terms of the front piece of marketing where you're talking to people and trying to get them to that meeting, it is a challenge there because all of our competitors, they're trying to say the same thing. But at the end of the day, when you talk to one of our clients and they say, yes, I mean, she put us into this formula,
Mm-hmm.
and, this will forever be what we smell like. This is who we are.